If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything that you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on any listening platform like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. From Battlefield Studio Alpha, welcome to the Wartime Leadership Podcast, where we explore what spiritual resilience looks like from different perspectives. We often focus on the physical, emotional, and social areas of resiliency, but too often we neglect the spiritual pillar. This looks different for everyone. We will be exploring what spiritual resilience looks like in the lives of our guests, who are people from all different walks of life. I'm Nathan Coy, and I am your host for today's episode. And today's episode is sponsored by Success Draft, where we help you transform your dreams into drafted plans. Head over to successdraft.com to get started on your future today. And speaking of today is super exciting because I know that we've gone international in the past. But they were Americans that were living abroad. Today, it even sounds international because we're coming to you with our guest from Melbourne, Australia. Welcome, Amanda Kate. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm doing really, really well. Thank you so much.
See what I mean? It just sounds international at this point. It makes me excited.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Hey,
I did 11 years in the UK, so my accent's a bit all over the place.
You know what? But we'll allow it. We'll allow it.
It is what it is.
It makes you, and that's what
Exactly.
we like most of all.
Hell yeah.
So, hey, this is actually really cool because you've been up for maybe an hour and a half or so. You did your exercise. You got ready. I mean, it is early morning right now, right?
Yeah. I was up at 5, working out by about 5:15. So that I had time to have a quick shower so that it's wet hair and all that sort of stuff, but was slightly presentable to come chat to you.
Well, I am super excited about this. It's like I tell everybody, I learn just enough about my guests to be able to know the questions I'm going to ask. But your story, your backstory, stuff that you've done, I think that you have a really special message, and I can't wait to be able to share it with the audience. So, but before we get going, you know what time it is. We have to ask these random questions, and it truly is a random question generator app that I have. So, how did you meet your best friend?
Well, funnily enough, I was one of those people who was always the best friend for everybody who had a falling out for their best friend in high school. So I'm not one of those people who's had a best friend for life. And it's one of those things that, I do actually feel quite sad about sometimes. I'd love that long-time friend. I sort of, seem to transient through them. My first best, proper, serious love of my life best friend, I actually met through my children. I walked into a Tumble Tots in the UK and we just clicked and we got along so well, but her son was about 5 or 6 months older than my son. And then she moved up a class and I was like, no, I don't get to see her anymore. But yeah, we just couldn't stay away from each other. So it got to the point, especially when our kids were little, we'd see each other 4 or 5 times a week. We'd cook each other's kids dinner once a week, so take some pressure off. And it was just beautiful. Like the kids were like siblings, and, you know, rainy days in the UK, didn't matter what was going on. We'd be out in our wet weather gear and stomping through fields and doing all sorts of stuff. So it was just phenomenal.
See, it's even better when the families are involved in those.
Oh, it was amazing.
Because then it just really feels like you naturally have somebody that you can, if you need to immediately drop off the kids, hey, I've got them. They're there.
Yeah.
So that's a good deal.
She's a pretty special person.
Yeah, I am not going to ask that question. I'm actually going to fast forward through it because that was not. No, that was highly inappropriate. What is the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to you?
Oh, God, where do you start? Oh, my God. I was one of those people who was super easily embarrassed. And so it didn't ever take a lot for me. I think I could probably put one up that I think most females have dealt with, and that's, you know, bleeding through the back of your school dress.
Oh, wow.
it's you find it absolutely mortifying because, of course, that's something you don't talk about, and that's something that's, you know, shameful and should be hidden away. And let's pretend that doesn't happen to girls. But I reckon it was about year 9 the first time it happened, and it was just absolutely mortifying. And, you know, especially in Australia, you know, on 40-degree days, you don't have your jumper with you. You got nothing to tie around your waist. So, you know, it can be pretty terrible. But luckily, you know, I think I had my jumper that time, or a girlfriend lent me one, or whatever it was. But so.
I mean, you think, you know, now as a father, and I'm looking back at some of these things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I would never have thought of it being a male. Obviously, you don't think about it a whole lot, and so it, you know, stuff will slip off of your tongue when you're saying stuff, and you just don't realize how it affects people. And that would be a perfect example of what that might look like.
Yeah.
Well, all right, here we go. Next question. I hope it's a good one. Yeah, no, we're not going to ask that one either. What is one thing that you find repulsive?
Oh, do you know what? I have to say, I think it's when people miss the toilet, and I just can't bear that. Can't bear it. It is a bugbear. And every other week, I live with, you know, 3 guys in the house. So, you know.
So you're used to really bad aim.
Well, I wasn't. This is a relatively new thing. So, you know, that's okay.
I mean, we'll go with
kids
repulsive.
Kids have got to learn. Yeah, kids have got to learn. That's okay. All okay.
All right. Which Disney villain would you play tennis with?
I am really bad at tennis. My hand-eye coordination has never been great. So whoever it is would probably wipe the floor with me. Disney villains, I've got to think through now. Goodness, there's so many. I like the one from Cars. He's probably one of my favorites.
Okay.
Yeah.
And all they would do really is kind of go back and forth anyways.
I might actually have a chance.
See, there you go. You take it out on them. There you go. Hey, Amanda, the conversation's been good already leading up to even the start of this. And now with the questions, you brightened my day. So I'm very happy about this conversation right now. Hey, why don't you walk us through your background? Kind of take us through where you've been. You know, you start wherever you want to and bring us up to the present.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, I had one of those childhoods that feels pretty normal at the time. You know, I was very blessed and had my parents, they're actually still together. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary this year. We had, you know, they didn't have a lot of money growing up. Mum would make our clothes. She was very handy, great sewer, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, I guess it looked like one of those pretty normal, wholesome childhoods. Dad went out to work, Mum stayed home. And, you know, I did what every white middle-class Church of England girl would do. I got good grades, and I was a bit of a goody two shoes because I was a bit afraid of, stepping out of line. The strictness was definitely there. The expectation was there. There was definitely an expectation to perform. And I don't think I realized how much that stifled me at the time. I kind of did. I remember finding some old diaries, and I wasn't great at keeping diaries, but, these few little bitch sessions I'd had in my diaries about it. But from the outside, I guess, again, it looked pretty normal, basic, pretty good upbringing. And then I did the usual, go off to university, got a job. And then I decided to go traveling because my sister had started traveling overseas. So I went over to the UK. And I ended up meeting my ex-husband there. And so my 2-year working holiday visa turned out to be 11 years. And I always joke that I went away with a backpack and a suit bag and came back with a 40-foot container, a husband and 2 kids.
So, yeah. I mean, that's a good way of looking at it.
My investment in my time over there certainly, I guess paid off in one way or another. Certainly the 2 kids I'm just ever so grateful for. But a lot of my time over there was really, really challenging. I was homesick. I was lonely. I remember just getting back from the honeymoon, and my ex-husband was like, well, you've got to create your own life. I've got one over here. You've got to sort yourself out. And I'm like, oh, I think I've made a big mistake. Like, that was the first time I really sort of went, ooh. And there were a lot of those little moments where I'd get these little, oh shit, I'm on my own over here. Crap. Like, there was one thing promised and now there's one thing actualizing. And I'd been, given the riot act by my parents that if I got divorced within 5 years, they had a 5-year money back guarantee, and I wasn't earning a lot of money. And, so I actually felt really stuck. And I know it was probably a joke, but at the same time, for me, it was very real. I was like, shit, how do I pay back a 10 grand wedding and all the rest? But, it was what it was. And so I kind of stayed to make the best of it. Had my son. It was amazing. My ex-husband worked away a lot. So he was gone from 6:30 in the morning till 7:30 at night, 5 days a week. And then he'd play football on the weekend. And, that took half a day out. So I was pretty much a single mum. I tried sort of taking a Saturday morning for me, and it was like, you shouldn't be taking so much family time away from the family. Like, we don't have a lot of family time as it is. And I'm like, well, I kind of need a little bit of time. But it was just this constant drops in the bucket. And it was really hard. We had a lot of toxic arguments, a lot of fights. And every time I tried to sort of stand up for myself, I would be shot down and all the rest of it. And I didn't understand that it was emotionally abusive. I didn't understand it was psychologically abusive. I didn't understand the financial abuse. I didn't understand any of those concepts. And so for me, it was, it was kind of normal. The woman stayed at home, the man went out to work, and okay, his attitude stunk, but, maybe that's just what it was. My mum had always said relationships are hard work, so I thought I was, getting an A+ and doing a great job because my relationship was that hard. So I'm like, yeah, awesome, winning. Different kind of hard. But, we ended up moving back to Australia because my ex-husband's role was made redundant. He had to turn off the lights on a company. And so we moved back to Australia. And the first couple of months here were probably the best couple of months that we'd had in our relationship. I guess it was new and exciting and all the rest. But then the reality hit, and the fact he'd moved away from his family. And, he actually had to step up and be a dad because we didn't have family support around us. All of that kind of stuff just started getting things to be more and more toxic. And then my son was struggling to settle in at school. He was physically hurt 13 times in 26 weeks at his new school. So he went from this bright, bubbly, beautiful, big-hearted little boy to stomach aches and nervousness and, a lack of desire to go to school and all of that sort of stuff. And my daughter had just started nursery school when we left the UK, but over here she was too young for school. And she's always been super, super bright. So I would have 4-hour tantrums from her in the day because she was just so frustrated and had such big emotions. And, you know, so I was literally dealing with all of this and trying to keep that house of cards from falling down. And, you know, it got to a point where I was needing 2-3 hour naps in the afternoon. Like I was not getting through the day, and I couldn't work out why, because I was usually such a self-starter. I was so motivated. I would fight through anything. And it really did get to a point where I had no idea what was going on with me. And doctors were like, "You're the healthiest sick person I've ever seen." And I'm going, well, there's something clearly wrong. And I was suffering for 13 days a month with my menstrual cycle. So there was about 6 days in the middle of the month, 7 days at the end of the month. And it was just exhausting me for the rest of the time. So the gynecologist was trying to put me on antidepressants. And that was really when alarm bells started going off. I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. Like, are you just trying to give me a prescription because you can't work out what the issue is? And so anyway, that was really what led me down the path of natural therapies. And in that path, I ended up finding kinesiology, which is what I do now, which is different from your kinesiology in the States. So for us, it's an energy healing modality whereby we're looking at the energetic buildup, the energetic stresses in the body, and vibrationally shifting them out. So we do a lot of trauma-informed work. It's a somatic therapy. So, you know, we do a little bit of EFT. We do almost like the EMDR eye movement type stuff. We do a bit of reflexology, acupressure points. You know, we sort of bring in a whole heap of different bits into kinesiology and use those vibrational frequencies to shift that trauma pattern out of the body. And I guess I started realizing that so much of what I was holding and so much of my chronic fatigue was actually caused by this emotional stress that I'd been under. I was walking on eggshells every day of my life. And it felt, I was always on edge. My nervous system was always primed for that next attack and that next attack and that next attack. And, you know, how do I stop that one from coming? And I was constantly alert and watching all of the tiny, minute behaviors to see if I was about to be under the pump or not. And so in that primed state, my nervous system just ran out of juice. Like it was just completely misfiring. My adrenals were completely shot. It's cost me thousands and thousands of dollars with my naturopath and chiropractor and kinesiologists and all sorts of other, you know, acupuncturists and Chinese doctors and all the rest of it to try and get them back into normal. And so, yeah, so finding kinesiology just changed my life. I remember my first session, my practitioner said to me, "I don't think you understand how emotionally abused you are, do you?" And I'm like, "What?" And she had to explain to me what it was. And straight away, a number of the relationships I had kind of fell into place. And I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it took me another 4 months to actually realize who my biggest abuser was. And it actually came because a friend spoke up and she's like, "You don't realize how screwed up your marriage is, do you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "It's not normal." And she started, and I'm like, you know, I must have been like explaining physics to a toddler because I was like, what? Like, wow. I don't understand. And she literally had to point out some of the things that I'd said and why it was screwed up and what a normal relationship looked like or what a healthier relationship looked like. Because let's face it, there is no such thing as normal, but what that healthy communion could be. And I was like, oh. And then all these cogs started falling into place. And then come the January, it was, I couldn't do it anymore. I had to leave. I couldn't. And then we had 6 months under the same roof, which was hell on earth. And I ended up, you know, at the police station more than once, and they were trying to get me to get an IVO, which is an intervention order, but I just couldn't do that to my children. I really couldn't do it to my children. And so I was like, I've got to find a new way to deal with this. And I think that's really when I delved into the more spiritual side of, I mean, I'd already been doing a lot of that work for a long time, but it's like I had to go all in with it. I had to find those spiritual teachers that spoke to me. I had to find those those things that would give me that strength, because I felt like a completely broken shell of a human being. And it was one of the toughest journeys. It still is one of the toughest journeys of my life. But again, I guess it's that choose your heart. And as hard as leaving was, staying, I believe, would have killed me in the end.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I mean, already, like, I wish I could actually show you. You can't see it because my backdrop, but you hit some really, really powerful things in just that little quick, like literally like 8-minute thing. It's just, you know, my natural, it was a natural defense mechanism that you were putting up. This almost like it was a blinder that you put on, you know, on racehorses. What they do in order to get them to go forward is they put those blinders on the side.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you had those blinders up that you couldn't see what was actually happening around you. And you had a really good friend who said, no, this is not healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
and without people speaking up, I wouldn't have ever realized, I don't think, because it was such a normal ingrained pattern. And it happens so insidiously. You know, emotional abuse is not one of those things that, you know, it's not like a punch where you know it's happening. It is like all of these little drops in a bucket, just gradually undermining a foundation until you are literally just a mess. Yeah. And you don't know what's up, what's down, what's right, what's wrong. You know, if I did one thing one day, it would be perfect. And then I'd do it the next day and it would be completely wrong. And I would be, it's like, I would have this verbal tirade about my behavior, about my opinions, about like like I would be ripped to shreds. And I'd be like, but yesterday that was good. And now I'm being ripped to shreds for the same thing. And so there was constantly changing goalposts. And that's how that's often how these kind of people work, is they change the goalposts all the time. So you never have sure footing. You're always off balance.
Yeah, always changing the field.
Yeah.
You know, it's like in the middle of a tennis match, they switch you from clay to hard court. It's just
exactly.
Two different styles.
You know what?
Play.
It wouldn't even be from clay to hard court. It'd be putting me in the middle of a squash court all of a sudden. Or badminton, or, you know, all of a sudden I'd be playing water polo. Like, it wasn't even the same game. It was a completely different game, completely different court, and I'd be chucked in the deep end and I'd be like, whoa, okay, now I've got to learn how to navigate this. And then I'd learn to navigate that. But, you know, it was changing so rapidly, I couldn't even keep up.
Yeah, and you didn't even know who the enemy was at that point, because it's like you said, that the system continued to change. It was just a lot of toxic arguments that continued to flip and flip.
And I blamed me. It was always my fault, because he truly believed he was perfect. That's you know, one of the big MOs. And so it was always my fault. And so when somebody is always telling you that everything that goes wrong is your fault, you believe it, because it's like this constant wearing away at your esteem, at your confidence, at your, you know, at everything that you hold dear about yourself, until there's nothing left. And so there was this part of me that just went, I can't do this anymore.
What was the defining moment? Like, when did it finally click for you? I can't do this.
When did it really first click?
Yeah.
When my son was 10 days old.
Wow.
My son was 10 days old and my ex-husband went out to his Christmas party. And I rang him at 10 o'clock saying, this baby has not stopped crying for over 5 hours. I need somebody here. I need some help. And he refused to come home. He did not come home till after 3 o'clock in the morning. And the baby had just gone to sleep. And I was beyond anything. And I went, you know what? This man is never going to prioritize me or this child. Ever. And then I felt stuck, because I was over the other side of the world from my family. I had no support structures. You know, I was like, what do I do? How do I do this? I've just got to get through. And so, but that was the first time that I really had that inkling. I guess the thing that tipped me over the edge to finally leave within 4 days. No, actually, I had a session on a Tuesday and a session on I think it was a Thursday, with my psychologist and then with my kinesiologist, and both of them said, look, both of them kind of had the same conversation. They're like, look, as much as this sort of goes against what I'm supposed to do with you right now, I don't think you're ever going to see this unless I bluntly say it. Have you ever heard of narcissistic personality disorder? And I went, no. And they went, go home and look it up. They didn't say any more than that, but I was reading it and I'm like, oh. And it was like all of these cogs just fell into place. And that night I kicked him out of my bed. I said, we're done. I can't do this. I cannot do this. It needs to be done.
And it's interesting that you say, I couldn't do that to my children when you were talking about getting the order against him. Yeah. And that brings a whole nother element into it. You know, you were willing to take the abuse on yourself. I mean, he was an abuser. Yeah. Outright. Yeah. And you couldn't take his children away from him, or you couldn't do that to your children to perpetuate it.
And I didn't want to leave them there to deal with it because I knew I was taking the brunt. I was bearing the brunt. And it did. It happened so that when I left, my son started bearing the brunt. And that felt awful. And I also had to remind myself, you know what, these kids have signed up for me as the mother and this man as the father. They have their lessons to learn. So all I can do is give them one happy home, promise them one happy home where they are loved, they can be themselves, and that's all I can promise them. But if I stay, I'm not going to make it. And then they're not going to have a mother and they're going to be left with that. And I was honestly at that point.
This is huge because, you know, my wife left her family to come live with me, right? She's from the Philippines. Oh, wow. And so she left to come to Guam originally. And then the next year we moved halfway around the world to Maryland. Yeah. So what do you say to individuals that don't have that support system directly around them? What do you think is a good way to go about when you move to a new area where you don't know anyone and you're kind of there in the middle of nothing?
Do you know, I don't think I have the answer for that. I had started again so many times and, you know, it was like starting again, and starting again. And it was exhausting because you're always having to put on your game face and be on the top of your game and be fun and pleasant and nice. And, you know, and you're in amongst all these school mums who have this history from kinder and from this and from that and from the other. And they've got their, you know, a lot of people have their school friends and a lot of people have their work friends and a lot of people. But because my school was in Adelaide, you know, and we moved from Perth to Adelaide when I was, you know, in my childhood, moving from Adelaide to the UK. And then because I was in amongst a bunch of travellers, they were constantly heading home. And then I'd be starting again with a new friend group. And then, you know, they'd all leave. And then I got some work friends. But of course, they all had their school friends and all of that sort of stuff. So it was actually really challenging. I felt like I was constantly starting again. And even then, when I left my ex-husband, every single friend I had left me. And because we didn't have that connection and nobody understood, I didn't understand that I was actually in PTSD. I had PTSD. And I know, obviously, you know, especially for you guys in the armed forces, you know, you understand a lot about that. But it's only really recent history that people understand that PTSD comes from other types of trauma as well. It's not just war trauma.
Absolutely.
That was where it first came from. But I was in PTSD.
Now, real quick, it depends on whose definition of war it is.
Yes. Well,
because my definition of war is not yours and it's your story. Yeah. So I don't, but I think that you're 100% correct that it wasn't until recent history. However, it's been going on for a very, very long time. PTSD does not say have anything in the military. It says post-traumatic stress disorder. Yes. Right. Yeah.
But it was originally, I think it was in the 1960s that it started to be coined that. And it was usually because of vets, because that was obviously the most obvious, you know, connection that people could make. But I was in it and I didn't realize that I would have these outbursts and I would have these, you know, crying fits, or I would have these angry fits, or, you know, whatever it was, because, and if you look at, you know, people who've been in domestic violence situations, it very much is that. And it's just a really like I say, it's been fascinating going through it, and it's made me a better person for going through it as well. But, and now I can, and I just need to say it because I think it is really important. I feel like I've done enough work now. I don't hate my ex-husband. He is doing the best he can with the tools he has. He is doing the best he can with my children, with the tools he has available. He is doing the best with his new partner that he can, with the tools he has available, the same way I'm doing the best I can with the tools I have available to me. And I truly believe that of him. I don't believe he ever woke up in the morning and went, you know what? I'm going to really piss off Amanda today. I'm going to hurt her. I'm going to damage her. I don't believe he ever did that. Now, and from his point of view, from his version of truth, there's something mentally wrong with me. I have a, mental disorder or whatever.
Yeah.
So he would actually say, and that's his truth. And I'm not going to stand in the way of that truth for him either.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I guess with PTSD symptoms, it probably looks like that. And when you're in an abusive situation, the person being abused is often the person who is not believed.
Mm-hmm.
Even my family didn't believe me that it was as bad as it was. Even now when I say things, my sister will still deny my truth. Still.
Wow.
Into the fact that we've barely spoken for 2 years. And so
I think that's a bigger letdown than anything else, is when those who are closest to you that are experiencing and seeing you go through something, when they don't grab onto the reality, because it's each individual's reality of the situation.
Yeah. And so I went through the loneliest period after divorce because I didn't feel like I could go to my parents. I couldn't go to my sister. My friends were leaving by the droves, and because it was hard dealing with divorce, when everyone else is in happy marriages. But I think that's the thing. What has helped me find my tribe, to sort of circle back, is becoming more and more me, becoming the truth of who I am, unlayering all of that trauma to actually get back to, and not even getting back to, but just discovering more and more of the truth of me. And I did a lot of work to, just go, God, just send me my people, send me my tribe. And it was amazing, actually, because those friends that cleared out, there were a few people sort of standing around the periphery that hadn't come closer because those other people hadn't stepped out far enough. But once these people left, it felt lonely. But then I'd just see these other people coming in. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is it. And I now have, probably a half dozen people who I just absolutely love and adore, who are there for me, who are, real soul sisters for me. Like really deep, deep friendships. And so I think that the more we can access that part of us and show our true self, the more we will naturally attract those people who are our tribe, because it's that vibrational frequency that people are reading. And nobody could ever get to like me before, because I was always trying to work out, how do I think they want me to be? So therefore, how should I act so that I can be accepted? How should I act so that I could be loved by these people? So I was a people pleaser. I thought I was so inferior to everybody else. I put everybody else ahead of me, and I would do everything I could. I would bust my ass to make everybody else happy. But in that, I've already got a power dynamic that's not going to work in a friendship, because I'm putting myself beneath everybody else and trying to make everybody else happy.
Where it should just be that level equal play.
Yeah.
And I like how you describe that. I love how you describe it, though. You say, I'm a recovering people pleaser.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then how do you naturally
fall into that?
I know. Well, that's kind of the direction I was going to go with this question. How do you balance that, right? There's a balance between it.
The thing that I notice now, and I think again, because I've gotten so intimately acquainted with my inner landscape. So the way I sort of describe it is I have built this internal scaffolding, which is that spiritual practice. It is the self-awareness. It is the self-responsibility for my healing and my reactions and all of that. And I'm building that external scaffolding, which is, having a divinely loving partner who respects me and loves me. The relationships I build with my children, the relationships I've been building with all of those other, facets of my life. Just 1 second.
So it's absolutely amazing hearing you talk about the tribe and understanding who the tribe is around you and those people who truly feed. And we're waiting for other individuals to kind of clear out and clear way, right?
Yeah.
And that's a good way of looking at it, because those are the when you describe tribe, obviously I'm an 8th Cherokee, Indian. So it's really kind of cool to think of the tribe, and everyone has a role that they play within that community. In your life as a leader, you had to develop and change yourself as you went through the different stages of what happened, from either moving to England or moving back to Australia, and then ultimately making that decision to leave your husband, leave the abuser in where they were.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you? Like, how did your leadership style develop over that course?
Oh, goodness. I don't think I had much leadership in me at all early in my life. I think I was so busy trying to people please. And the people pleaser doesn't stand up and lead anything, to be honest, because they're so busy waiting for everybody else to make the first move and trying to work out, what's going on. And I think as I got out of that, phase of my life and that marriage, I was really more just tapping more and more into my heart space. What would love do? What's in my highest good right now? And I think that by tapping, and the subtitle of my book is Prioritizing Internal Truth Over External Influence. And the more and more I did that, the more I tuned into my internal truth. I mean, having my family tell me I was making a big mistake, having my friends tell me things like, in 6 months, you're going to regret it and he'll have moved on and you won't be able to get him back. I had people say, you'll never be loved the way he loves you. And I'm like, well, part of the reason I'm leaving is I never want to be loved like that again, let's face it. But there was this part of me going, you are all wrong because you don't know my truth. And what you're choosing to do is see the rich, successful man rather than the woman who has been struggling for years. And you're not seeing the truth of me. What you're seeing is the picture that we have painted and that I have protected so that they wouldn't see the truth of who he was.
Wow.
That's what you're seeing. You're seeing this facade that I built that makes it look amazing. But you're not seeing behind that facade to the truth of what's going on. And so I really had to trust that my heart was leading me in the right direction. And so I never really set out to be a leader. I set out to know me. I set out to get to the truth of who I was, to my heart, to what my soul wanted. I was trying to listen to that quiet voice inside me that knew what I needed to do. Because I was so used to looking outside of myself at the shiny lights, at the brightness, at at everybody else's opinions. But there was that tipping point where I was like, no, you guys don't know me. You actually don't know what you're saying. You don't know what you're looking at, because what you're seeing, as I say, is this fakeness that I've created that you think is picture perfect, that is anything but behind the scenes. And getting into that heart space and finding spiritual practices that were for me, because having grown up in the church, I found it was a lot of that, People would walk in and be holier than thou and walk out and be the same asshole they were before they walked in. And I'm like, I don't like that kind of hypocrisy. I can't cope with that. And I think because also, my ex-husband's the, hi, how are you? Everything's fake. Nothing ever reaches the eyes. There's the kind of joke. And I'm like, ooh, that lack of resonance, the lack of it touching the eyes, the soul, that for me creates that disconnect. And I can't do that. I want somebody who is congruent and whole and truthful, where when they laugh, their eyes light up, where when they, connect with people, it is a really heartfelt, hi, how are you? Not a, hi, how you doing? It's real.
The faux facade.
Yeah, exactly. I want real now. And I think the more I've gotten in touch with my real, the more people have just seen it and they're attracted to it because they're like, oh, you're doing you. Okay. This is interesting. And I think in me doing me,
look like.
Yeah. And in me doing me, it's like that Marianne Williamson quote, I'm giving them permission to shine their light and to be who they are. And that's what I want to do with leadership, is become more and more me. I have one value. I kind of got rid of all the others. I got it down to one value, which is self-mastery. The more I can master myself, the better I can show up in the world, the more heart I can show into the world, the more me I can become, the more I control my reactions and become responsive, the more I can shine my light, the more I am in divine service of others and can help them shine their light. That's that thing.
In resilience, you look for certain key things, and I see a lot of resilience and leadership coming along together a lot. Like they parallel each other a lot. And one of those things is moral courage, right? To have the moral courage to stand up to those who aren't right, who are not moralistically sound in what they're doing, as well as, there's all these different, they want to create psychologically safe environments for individuals to be able to share their thoughts, their ideas, and be able to express who they are, as well as when something is wrong.
Yeah.
So you said I didn't see myself as a leader younger in life, but in reality, you really were. Because you still had to stand up in many of those moments, even if it's inside of your mind, to say that that's wrong.
Yeah.
So I think you've been a leader a lot longer than you think. It just took, it was more of a leader in development. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned it a few times, and the name of your book is Divine, Messy, Human. Yes. And it really hits into some of those spiritual aspects. So I'd really like you now to take us on a journey of, how do you define spiritual resilience?
Yeah. So I actually wrote it as a small. My book is kind of little bite-sized chapters because it's about the tools and techniques that I used to kind of, I guess, get me through this. So it is about emotional fluency and why we have a natural propensity for darkness in our thoughts. And, but I wrote on my idea of spirituality. And I think because my early idea of spirituality, I always loved being in church. I loved when everyone sang together, whenever you could feel everyone's hearts expanding. I just didn't like the bit where everyone stepped outside and put on their normal human clothes. I loved the divinity in church. I still love going into an empty church and just sitting quietly. And I know a church is a building. And look, I walk the beach every morning for about 7K with my dog. And, that is also my church. Nature is also my church. For me, the idea of where I can touch God has increased dramatically. And, I use different terms interchangeably. I call it God, the goddess, source, creator, universal intelligence, whatever. I use different names depending on the aspects, even Mother Nature, depending on the aspect of God that I'm connecting to, because I don't think, I don't certainly look at God as this vengeful, brimstone and fire, man with a white beard up in the clouds. I also don't really see, it as a gendered thing. For me, it's that power. It is that source. It is the pure love, pure joy, pure happiness, pure peace. It is that purity of spirit that we all have within us. Every single person has that within them. It's the messy humanness. It is the conditioning. It is our life experiences. It is all of the stuff that happens to us and has happened to our family, that has passed down to us, and that, whether you believe in it or not, that we've brought in from past experiences as souls here in human form, whatever you want to call it. All of those different aspects, I think, feed into our experience now. And as we can unlayer and uncover that more messy human aspect, then we can tap into that divinity more and more. And we can be accepting of when we do screw it up and when we fall into our messy humanness. I'm by no means, standing in my divine self all the time. I am messy as hell. And I think that's the beautiful paradox of the journey, is that we can hold those things both true at the same time. I have a deep love for who my ex-husband is. He is the father of my children. He is doing the best he can, and I will never condone his behavior. And they can sit comfortably side by side. They don't need to compete for attention anymore. They used to compete for attention because I'd be like, I should be able to love this person as a soul being, but this is standing in the way. With the work I've done, they can sit comfortably side by side, so none are drawing my attention.
Wow.
We had a bit of a dispute last night about, we're supposed to be going off on holiday this afternoon. And anyway, we had a bit of a challenge with where the kids are going to be and how we're going to, be able to head off a bit early and all of this kind of stuff. Now, in that moment, I did not, I felt like a 3-year-old throwing a tantrum, but I wanted to leave at this time. This isn't fair. We've been waiting for this getaway for so long and now it's being delayed. I felt like that toddler who was chucking her toys out the pram. Now, was there a better way for me to handle it? Of course there was. Of course there was. There will always be a better way to handle it. I'm still as messily human as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to do is tap into that divinity more and more. It's to see God in nature. It is to see God in the other person. I could also see everybody in the situation last night was still doing the best they could, even though we were all acting unresourcefully. So, and there's no judgment in that either. Again, that's part of that paradox. I can see the unresourcefulness. I can see the divinity. I can see there'd be a better way to do it. And yet we're doing it this way. Okay. It's all there and it's all existing at the same time. And I think for me, that is almost the crux of that spirituality, is being able to see those different aspects and accept that they're all there, that they all exist, and not try and fight one or the other.
Yeah. And I really appreciate how you said that, where they can now comfortably sit side by side, because I think too often we want to clean it up and we want to make it look better and we want it to go away.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's still a part of who we are. It's still our story. It's still how it's written. And it's a part of who we are and where we came from. My history, I would love to not have ever have done any of the stuff I had done in my past if it meant the same outcome.
Yeah. Exactly.
If it meant a different outcome, absolutely no.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really like
and I think, even when I bring it to, my sister, I obviously had to grieve so much because we were best friends at one point, and I had to really, really sit and grieve that. And then it came into this whole thing of, okay, is she somebody who is safe to have in my life? Will she respect my boundaries? Will she respect my history? I can't see that happening. So, okay, distance is the best thing for us. When I saw her in July for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, I literally as I said goodbye to her, I gave her all I could think the whole time I was there. God, I miss you. I miss you. And as I said goodbye to her, I just said, I miss you and I love you. Now, that is the 100% truth. I miss her and I love her. And also, I won't have that in my life whilst it is not safe for me.
Yeah, you can't do that to yourself.
No.
Nor to her, to give her
no
acceptance for what has been said in the past.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how do you build it? How do you build that spiritual resiliency that you talked about in yourself, in your family? How do you build up spiritual resilience?
How do I do it? Do you know, I don't judge the others for where they're at, you know, and I don't really ram it down my kids' throat either. I really just demonstrate where I'm at. I admit when I'm wrong. I'll tell them that I'm wrong. I'm much better now at seeing my own flaws and my own faults and being able to allow them to be there without as much judgment so they can sit with a bit more acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, if they say big kids, big problems, you know, if my kids come to me with, you know, what's going on for them, okay, you know, what does support look like for you? What do you need from me? And a lot of the time they just need a hug. They just need to know that someone's there. And in me doing this work, it's been really interesting watching my relationship with them. It's like they're learning through osmosis. They come to me, you know, it's quite funny. I know when, say, for example, my son wants to speak to me, he sort of just hops from foot to foot. He's, you know, he's 6'3". He's, you know, crazy big kid, you know, nearly 17, and he hops from foot to foot, just waiting for mum to be ready. Honey, do you need to talk? Yeah. Okay. All right. Is this do we stay here in the kitchen or do you want to go somewhere else? You know,
I want to go somewhere else.
But there's that little, you know, there's just that little thing. And I can always tell because it just kind of hangs around. It's like he's trying to get the courage up to say whatever he needs to say. And I just let him do it. The same, my daughter kind of does a similar thing as well. You know, there's that little hang around and, okay, Mum, I need to talk to you. Okay, no worries. And so it's really almost just holding the space for them to do their own discovering. They know I'm here. They know I can give advice, but realistically, do they want my advice? I mean, what do I know? I'm just their mum, you know? And so it's giving. So I think, you know, in terms of that spiritual resiliency, I'm playing my game. I'm doing my inquiry. I'm doing my practices. I do my own work. And it really is almost that solo game for so much of it. But it changes the way I interact with people. It changes the way I love them, the way that I talk to them, the way that I care for them, the way that I show up for them. And so, you know, I mean, my kids still laugh at how I was before. And they've seen the change and they're like, oh God, where's, you know, as terrible as it was the best thing you did. You know, they can admit that because they've seen the change in me. They're living the change in me. You know, they don't have the mum who will fly off the handle at nothing and, you know, scream and shout and externalize all her pain. They have a mum now. I can't even remember the last time, you know, my voice was raised with them. You know, I'm really struggling for that kind of thing because there's just not that same anger sitting there anymore.
Yeah, but I think that this answer that you just gave kind of answers the balance question from earlier, because I think that the people-pleasing balance that you found is, what do you need from me? Because you recognize that, you know, let's take your kids, for instance, they're both different.
Oh, yeah.
They're both different. They need different things from you as mom, right? They need that. And you have recognized, okay, I know you're coming to me for something. What do I need to give you?
Yeah.
And that's people pleasing, yes, but it's balanced because you're not giving them more than what they're asking, and you're not taking more than you need.
Yeah. So the way I sort of look at that is, my big thing is about being of service to others rather than in service to others. So before, I was working from this place of being in service to others, in servitude, making myself less than. Now I'm of service to others. What do you need from me? What can I give you? What do I have the capacity to give you? Do I have to say no here? Is that going to cross a boundary? I've got a lot more nuance and a lot more discernment around what I can offer, what I want to offer, what I feel they need, and also that awareness that sometimes people just want to talk, or sometimes people just want to offload steam, or sometimes, whatever it is. And that's okay too. And so I think that's the biggest thing that spiritual development has given me, is that discernment, is that understanding of equality or equity, whatever you want to call it, that, we all take different positions. It's not this hierarchy. It's more of a global system, and we're sort of, all somewhere in the mix at some time. Sometimes we'll be at the top of the globe, other times we'll be at the bottom of the globe. My children always teach me stuff. Always. So that doesn't mean I'm their teacher and they're, my student. I'm this, we're sort of both in both roles. And so I sort of see that more global sort of model where people can be in multiple positions at once and learning and growing and teaching at the same time.
I think that us as parents always want to be the one who's teaching the lesson, who's always, hey, that's not the right thing to do. When in reality, maybe it's the right thing for them, as long as it's moral, as long as it's moral, ethical, legal, whatever those cases may be. But you're right. Sometimes people just need to talk to be heard. So it's actually interesting when my staff comes to my door and in the office, and I know that my one, when she walks in, I know exactly, okay, she is with purpose right now. So I ask one simple question. Well, two simple questions. Do you need me to listen to hear?
Yeah.
Or do you need me to listen to respond?
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
Huge difference maker in even my life at home. Like, okay, sweetheart, do you need me to listen to respond, or do you just need me to hear?
Yeah. My girlfriend has a very similar but different one of that. So when she wants her husband just to listen, she'll go, okay, story. And then she says it. And then sometimes she gets partway through the story and she'll be like, oh, actually, no, I actually do want your input on this one. Or sometimes she'll get partway through the story and realize she didn't say story. And she's like, shit, he's going to be responsible. Hang on, this one's a story. So very similar, but it's that,
I need to start really using that. Tell her that I am stealing it from now on. Hey, and all of this, has brought up some really good, I have more questions, and I wish we could go just a whole nother hour, actually, but you've got to take your kids. You've got to do school duty. So real quick, can you take us through Divine Messy Human, your book? Just kind of give us the highlights of what it looks like.
Yeah, the subtitle is A Spiritual Guide to Prioritizing Internal Truth Over External Influence. And that really is, I guess, it in a nutshell. As I said, the whole book is pretty much just the title. It is looking at the divinity. It is looking at our messiness. It's looking at our humanity. It's giving tools and techniques that I've used. So it's not a lot of my story. There's not a lot of my story in there. It's more about the how I did it and the tools I used and some of those major bits. So it is done in really short little bite-sized chapters, and a lot of people have said they really love that because they can pick it up and read a quick chapter and, it's easily digestible. And, it does hit some esoteric points. It does get quite deep at times. But also, I think people will access it differently depending on where they're at. So it is simple enough for people who are just starting to dip their toe into that spirituality. And it also works for people who've been doing the work for a while. And I think that is the beauty of it. Like, I'm so proud of it. I know it sounds crazy, but it was literally 120 days from me typing the first words to holding it in my hands, because once I opened that container, it just flowed, because it had been in my head for so long. I talk about concepts, of the acceptance, of discernment, of creating boundaries. So it really kind of encapsulates a lot of the stuff we've talked about today, just in slightly different ways, balancing our masculine and feminine principles, how we can look at, becoming more whole as through that healing journey. Learning to love those bits of us we've been ashamed of, or we've cut off, or we've hid from the world, and learning to accept those parts of us back into the fold.
And we will have a link in the description below for individuals who are looking forward to that book. I know plenty well. Mine's in the mail, so I'm excited because awesome. I get to go on that.
Thank you.
And now I really hate to do this with authors, especially because immediately they're like, well, everyone should just read my book.
Oh, no.
But I'm looking on the bookshelf behind you, and I'm seeing that you got plenty of other things that aren't just divine, messy humans. So,
oh my God,
why don't you give us 1-2 books that you recommend for listeners to read or listen to?
I think especially because, obviously your jam is leadership. I think you can't go past Brené Brown's work with courage and vulnerability. I think any of her stuff, the Dare to Lead stuff especially, is phenomenal. But all of her work on courage and vulnerability is amazing. And I know she's done some work she talks about with the US Armed Forces, which is, incredible. So that is always a hugely, recommended work of mine. I'm often giving it as homework for my clients to just go and either watch some of her videos or listen to some of her podcasts or whatever it is, because I think the wealth of knowledge that she brings is so easily digestible and easily accessible. She gives words to things that, I've been working on for years as well. I also think that, some of the classics are amazing. I love The Prophet. I love what was the other one? The Alchemist. They're the two.
Oh, yes.
Can't go past those. I just think they're beautiful prose. They're so easy to read and so quick, and they're just so deep. Every time you read them, you get something new from them. So they'd be my big ones.
Yeah, the Alchemist has actually been suggested multiple times on the shows. So absolutely 100% get behind that. Well, Amanda, do you have any final words that you would like to leave us with?
I think it's look in before you look out. Listen to your inner voice before you go and get distracted by the big shiny lights and everybody else's opinion. We always know the answer. Even though we want to go and survey monkey every person out there to get everybody else's opinion on what we should do, we actually are asking the question because we know the answer. We don't always want to act on it.
Oh, I love that survey monkey the life of everyone. I like that.
Well, my ex-husband always used to my ex-husband always used to throw at me, everybody says this about you and everybody says that about you. And I'm like, everybody? Who did you survey monkey? Are you sure you survey monkeyed everybody? That was what I think in my head, but I'm like, okay, everybody, those absolutes.
Oh, I like it though. You're a smart aleck and I like it. Amanda, it has been absolutely amazing having you here today. We've been blessed that you've taken the time to invest into us. I truly love the fact that we went international and we sound international, and it's just thank you for waking up so early to be here with us.
Absolute pleasure.
Hey, today's episode is only possible thanks to my friend and producer, G. Frazier, with 369sounddesign.com. Jeff and I were stationed together for many years, and just kind of that relationship continued to grow into one that we have working together each and every single day today. He is the one with the hardest job by trying to make me sound good. We are blessed by the entire team here at the Wartime Leadership